everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Ashtyn.
And my name is Kevin, and we are excited to be recording our first episode finally of Thinking Rightly.
Yep.
And we hope this will be a huge help to you guys, and I know it will be fun for myself and Ashtyn. But the first thing that we want to talk about today on the podcast is thinking rightly about the church. And that's a big subject, the subject of the church. So this will be considered part one of thinking rightly about the church. And we will primarily cover things to do with worship and the different activities that happen in a worship service or in the church and things like that. But the first thing we want to do, just so you guys can get to know us better, is to start off with an icebreaker question that Ashtyn has for us.
Yeah, I thought this would be a fun idea to do since this is our first episode. You guys might not know much about us. Maybe we'll do like a Q&A on Instagram in the future if we get enough followers. But anyways, yeah, so the icebreaker for today is what's something new you tried this year that you fell in love with? Also, if you guys want to answer this question, you can go to our Instagram. We'll probably have a post up about this episode. You can answer it. I'd love to hear your answer. But I'll let you go first, Dad.
So something new that I tried this past year, 2022, so we're in 2023 now, was I went to a new city, the city of Philadelphia, and fell in love with it. Very historic, a lot of good places to eat. Went there with a bunch of pastor friends of mine, and we just really enjoyed ourselves there. And that was something that I really loved and enjoyed. That was new to me because it was a new city. What about you?
So you've never been to Philadelphia?
I've been to the Philadelphia airport before that, and that was it.
So
I ran through it because I was about to miss a flight. But this time we got to spend time there, so it was fun.
Do you think you would go back to Philadelphia?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
It's a cool city.
And I would have never thought to go to Philadelphia either. Like I would have never thought, oh, let's go to Philadelphia.
No, it's great.
Would have never been in my mind. I don't know why.
Very historic. I would say even more historic than Washington, D.C. in a lot of ways.
And we've been to Washington, D.C.
Yep.
That's hard to believe.
Historic locations.
That's
really
cool.
good restaurants.
I would never thought that.
So, yeah.
One thing that was new for me this year, I tried was rock climbing. There's a rock climbing gym in the area. We only have one. And I went for a youth group event. And I ended up really falling in love with it, and I got a membership, like, pretty much, like, the next week, and I got my own gear and everything, and I even got to go on a couple of outdoor climbing trips this year, and I've only been climbing for, like, 7 or 8 months now, so it's pretty cool that I got to experience that, because not everybody gets to do that.
Yep. How high was the climb, the one highest climb that you did?
There was a climb, it was in Tennessee, and it was named Super Saturated. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it was roughly 95 feet high, and I agreed to climb it, and that was like the first big climb that I've ever done, and it was really scary.
And you did it?
I did do it. I was
awesome.
Scared though. I mean, I was shaking so bad. Like climbers get this thing when you get a lot of adrenaline going. It's called the Elvis leg. It's when your leg shakes really bad. And so everybody on the ground was like, you had the Elvis leg, and I was like, oh, it's weird, you can't control it. So yeah, that was one thing that I fell in love with, and I hope to continue in this next year. But yeah, I think that's it, and we should go ahead and get into
Jump right into our topic. So today, on our first podcast, we want to explore what it looks like to think rightly about the church. And like I said earlier, this is a big topic, but there are, as all of us know, there are many options in America when it comes to churches, so much so that many American Christians can and do shop for the right church. So what is their music like? Do they have a good children's ministry? Do they have a good youth ministry, young adults or singles ministry, et cetera, et cetera? You can just go on with your list of things that you're looking for in a church. Or others may be looking for the entertainment value of a church service. So from the music to the preaching. So you have these churches who put on elaborate services involving high-level dramas, movie production level, concert level music. And so I know of one pastor, and this is just a simple thing, but he tells a joke before his sermons that has nothing to do with his sermon. He just feels like he needs to tell a joke to kind of break the ice, and that's what he does. Or several churches that do what they call at the movie sermon series, and that usually takes place during the summertime, but they'll go all out with a red carpet that people walk in on, and they serve popcorn, and they actually play clips of the movie that I'm not even sure is legal during the worship service, and then they will use that movie as their quote unquote sermon text for the morning. So this is all without mentioning what prompted this topic that Ashtyn's going to get into here in just a second in the first place, which was a church in Texas that I'm sure a lot of you guys saw over the Christmas season, where drummers were flying from the ceiling during a Christmas production, which is what we found out. It was a Christmas production. It wasn't a Sunday morning worship service. It was a Christmas production. But Ashtyn's going to talk a little bit about that and some other churches that also did similar productions during Christmas time.
Yeah, so I did research on a couple churches. These are both mega churches, and they are very different, but they're also very similar. So if any of you guys are on TikTok, like me, addicted to it, you have probably seen the drummers rigged to the ceiling of this church, and it's captioned "Little Drummer Boy," and then there's text on the screen that says "Casual Christmas Worship Service in Texas." It got 2.4 million views, and it made a lot of people really mad, and people just laughing at it, and it overall got a lot of negative feedback. So I decided to look into this church, and after doing a little more research, I found out the church is called Prestonwood Baptist Church in Plano, Texas. They do have 2 different campuses, but Plano, Texas is where this production called The Gift of Christmas takes place. So this isn't a church service. It is a production that they charge people for. So they sell tickets. They sell tickets, yeah. Yeah, they sell tickets. So I couldn't find any videos of the actual production online because the ticket prices are very expensive, which I'll get into later. So I'm sure they don't want to put the production out online for free. But I did find some clips of a woman who did attend it, and she took some videos, put them on YouTube. And I did watch the videos. And I'm going to give a quick little description on how this production went. So this is like their biggest show. And the show is incredibly well done. I can't even deny that. It's incredibly well done. There's a bunch of people involved. It's crazy. It's crazy to watch. So from the clips that I was able to find online, I could tell that the show starts off in some place that looks like the North Pole. So there are people dressed up as elves, singing and dancing on the stage and all through the aisles, and there are adults and kids involved in this show. Not sure if this is paid for the adults. I don't know if this is a volunteer thing. I'd genuinely be curious.
It's probably volunteer.
Yeah, I'm sure it's volunteer because, it's a big deal. But as the show continues, there's just a bunch of singing and dancing to just generic Christmas songs. We don't hear any of the Christian Christmas songs yet. They play Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and they have people dressed up as reindeers come down from the ceiling. Like, they're quite literally, I was just talking about climbing, they're on ropes, like, coming, like climbers. I noticed this when I watched the video back again. They had their little, belay devices, and they were coming down, they had the ropes. It was so funny.
Get some
I know, it was
that.
very interesting, and they had to be trained. They had the reindeer coming from the ceiling, which seems to be a theme in the show. They had a lot of different people coming down from the ceiling. Then, of course, Santa Claus makes an appearance, alongside some more singing and dancing elves. And then a life-size sleigh comes down from the ceiling, with some, there's some, not smoke. Why am I blanking? Steam. What's it called?
Snow?
No, it comes out of the back of the sleigh. dry. It's like the dry ice
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. They just made it look like it was flying. Yeah,
exactly. They had that going on too, and then Santa got in the sleigh and like exited like back up into the balcony area, which was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I saw that. It was pretty.
It
impressive.
was pretty impressive.
I'm not sure where he went, but
yeah, we don't know where he went.
It was pretty impressive.
Anyways, so then there's some fake snow, some glitter falls down from the ceiling. And then it seems that the second half of the show is more about the true meaning of Christmas, meaning Jesus' birth. So it begins with two contemporary dancers dancing as Adam and Eve. There's a dramatic narrator in the background, I don't even know, like just telling the story of Adam and Eve. And then this is where the drummers make their entrance, the TikTok drummers. They were coming down from the ceiling, and they played Little Drummer Boy. And then there was a guy on the stage, and I can compare him to Bruno Mars, maybe, because his performance was very similar. And all this time, the drummers are still rigged to the ceiling. And, I mean, again, it's very impressive. Very, very well done. I don't know how they pulled it off, but... and then there's backup dancers, of course. I thought this half would be more about Jesus' birth, but it wasn't for a little bit. Then there is a hip-hop dance. I think they dance to Joy to the World, if I remember correct. A gospel choir. And then there's like a rip-off Pentatonics group, like an a cappella group that they tried to model after Pentatonics. And then there's a man singing Mary Did You Know, who I think is Bruno Mars, the same guy from earlier. And then
it's not Bruno Mars.
It's not Bruno Mars, but he looks very similar.
Yes.
And then finally, we get to the live nativity. I think this happens within the last 15 to 20 minutes of the show, which the show is like probably 2 hours, more than 2 hours. I think it's more than 2 hours. So it's pretty normal nativity. They got live camels and some very extravagant costumes, and they also have an angel rigged to the ceiling above the stage to no one's surprise. And the show ends with everyone bowing to the baby Jesus, kind of Lion King style. And everyone gives it a standing ovation. So that's the show. There's, of course, lots of things that I missed in there. But I think I will be able to link the YouTube video on our page so you can go see it for yourself, or the TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch. But what really blew us away was the cost of this production. So I did some more digging, and I found out that, like I said earlier, the show takes place at Prestonwood's Plano, Texas campus, which can fit up to 7,500 people. This is a church. That's a sanctuary. The show often sells out. So the video I watched, the lady said that 7,000 seats were sold out, which is a lot of people. I don't even think...
7,000 tickets were sold?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that's a lot of people, and it was packed. Like, from the videos, it's packed. I don't even think I can wrap my head around, like, that many people. But, anyways, 75,000 people.
7,500.
7,500. 7,500.
Yeah, 75,000 would be...
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me, if I'm being honest. So, according to, I'm going to give him credit, _DEL Belcher on TikTok, he did a lot of research on this show. But the tickets were sold for $19 to $59 a piece. The average ticket price would be $36.50 per person. And this doesn't include the $22 per person Christmas buffet, gift shop, parking, and donations price. So I'm guessing that if you want to take part in the Christmas buffet, I guess this is just the average price for, like, if you want to take part in the Christmas buffet, the gift shop, and then you have to pay for parking, which is interesting to me.
Wow.
And then donations. So you can donate to this show. As if they're not already making enough money. Like, just... Mm-hmm. So this year alone drew in more than 75,000 people. 1,000.
Oh, that's where you get the
That's where I got the 1,000 from.
Gotcha.
From its 14 shows. So they did 14 separate shows. And then I gathered the budget for the show was at least $1 million. So if that doesn't tell you something about the show and the church, I don't know what will.
So that's what they made.
Well, no, this is the budget for the show.
Oh, how much it costs to put it on.
This is how much it costs to put it on. Like, so wow. They have more money than this $1 million, which I think I'm about to get to, yeah. So the worship pastor in residence, Michael Neal, says the great thing is it doesn't cost the church to do it because the ticket sales support it, which means the show like rides solely on ticket prices or ticket sales. The church doesn't specifically say they use their ticket sales for anything else other than the show, so we don't really know where all the other money goes, but probably into the church.
They make a lot of money.
Yeah.
From the production.
Yeah. So as a total estimate, Prestonwood makes about $3.5 million off of the gift of Christmas, and that's what I found on Prestonwood. Yeah. Well, it's getting more because the ticket prices have been going up.
Gotcha.
So it's getting to be more. Alrighty, so the next church, this one will be a little bit shorter because I couldn't find as much information on it. They're a little bit more secretive, but we have another mega church. They are called Victory Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they put on a production called The Story of Christmas. So the same TikToker that I mentioned earlier, his name is _DEL Belcher. He posted a video of The Story of Christmas, Victory Church, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 2022. And it's a clip from the production. And it's crazy. It's really crazy. Basically, we have some girls. Again, we'll probably try to post these videos, but basically we have some girls on a pink bed. And I used to be a big Ariana Grande fan. So this is an Ariana Grande song they're singing.
Used to be, right?
Yes, used to be. I'm not anymore.
Okay.
I still love some of her songs, but I'm not anymore. I promise. But anyways, they are in silk pajamas, and they're basically singing the song Seven Rings by Ariana Grande. Christian version. My favorite line of theirs is, there's a line about tithes and offerings that they slip into the song, which is very ironic. The song's all about making money.
Yeah.
So.
That's funny.
Anyways. And then it goes into a version of Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi, which how do those songs even, like, mesh?
Yeah.
They don't. Anyways, so I did find the entire production online. They do put their production out, unlike Prestonwood. So I will also probably put that on Instagram as well. It is very interesting. So the show actually starts out with the narrator saying this line: "Your life is a garden. Believe it or not, you're the product of what you yourself have planted one day at a time." So as soon as I heard that line, I knew it was going to be good. So the production switches back and forth between actors on stage and then some videos on the screen. So they took the actors that are on stage and they filmed them, like, I guess a different day. And so they were switching the videos back and forth. And, like, the production quality, again, is, like, very, very impressive.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Which makes me feel like they did sell tickets for the show, even though I couldn't find, like, information on that. But I'm sure they did. So the show is basically a modern take on... They mostly focus on Mary and Joseph. And there were two children in the beginning of the show. It was very confusing. It was a very confusing show. So two children in the beginning of the show entered a garden, and there was, like, an old man in there, and he scared them, and the gardener started telling them the story of Mary and Joseph. Later we find out the gardener had a close relationship with Mary and Joseph, apparently. He was just kind of an added character into the show, I guess, but still very confusing. The show kind of opens with after the whole interaction with the kids in the garden, it opens with some people on a stage, and then there's a lady, like, on a pedestal. She's in this huge extravagant gown singing, and later I found out she was supposed to represent the moon, which is interesting to me because I don't remember that in the Bible. So
yeah, that is
but there's a lot of things in here that are not in the Bible. So there's dancers, and then Mary and Joseph come out and they sing their little emotional part, and then the song changes to a hip-hop beat, and then they introduce the characters from the garden. They call it the Winter Garden because it's like a dead winter garden. It's supposed to represent our lives as Christians. They introduce rain, sleet, snow, moon, and stars, and then the spider, who's later Herod, who turns into Herod. I don't even know. And the 5 flowers are introduced. There is the winter rose, which is the rose of Sharon, the crawling ivy, who was actually performing on silks earlier in the show, hanging in front of the stage. The lily of the valley, the fading flower, and the lily of the field. All of these have significance that they explained, but I'm not going to go into it. And the winter garden, like I said, is supposed to represent our lives as Christians. And then the gardener, this is when the gardener starts telling the story of Mary and Joseph. The language is very modern, even though it is supposed to be set in Bible times. As the production continues, there's a lot of hip-hop dancing and music, TikTok references, and out-of-context songs, and also characters who just don't fit into the story, like I said earlier. They even put a sorority into the story called the Girls of Nazareth, who are the people we see on the pink bed later in the performance. Those are the Girls of Nazareth.
Yeah. Okay.
These girls are supposed to be like the mean girls of the story, so I think they kind of modeled it after Mean Girls, the movie Mean Girls.
Yeah.
So so like I said earlier, they perform a rendition of Seven Rings, complete with silk PJs and a huge pink bed. And the boys come in singing a rendition of Living on a Prayer. Somehow, this song goes into Can't Help Falling in Love with You, which then goes into Dancing Queen. So they put a Elvis Presley song in there, and then they put an ABBA song in there. All four of them together. So, yeah. At the halfway point...
I wonder if they get rights to those things.
I don't think they do.
I wonder if they could get in trouble for that. But
well, and they're asking for it. They put the whole production on YouTube, so they're asking for it.
I don't know how that works.
I have no clue.
Probably should have done research on that.
Well, they probably have enough money to get them out of that. At the halfway point in the production, one of the lead pastors at Victory, Paul I don't know how to pronounce his name. Dougherty, I think is how you pronounce his name. He comes out to give a message, which is just like a little like health and wealth kind of thing. Like, I don't know. I didn't really pay attention. He's just whatever. And then on a side note, Paul has 42. Oh my gosh, wait, I glitched. 42,200 followers on Instagram, and his wife has almost 10,000. His wife is also his co-pastor.
Yeah.
Co-pastor.
Co-pastor.
So the show continues. Herod, aka the spider from earlier, at his palace with some hip hop dancing Roman soldiers, and then the show cuts to a video of Mary and Joseph making a dramatic journey to Bethlehem, and then the mean priest I didn't mention this, but he was earlier in the show. He's actually the gardener from the garden. He ends up helping Mary at the birth of Jesus, which is very interesting because they kick Joseph out. They kick Joseph out of the stable, and then the priest comes in. And he's a guy.
Interesting.
So I'm like, it didn't make any sense to me. And then the gardener, it's like cut to the gardener, and he was like, yeah, that's me, blah, blah, blah. And like how he learned a lesson and blah, blah, blah. So this is not biblically accurate. Then they very briefly show the shepherds and the wise men, which just shows that the show is basically focused on Mary and Joseph. So then there's a real baby playing baby Jesus. And let me add, this baby was screaming the entire time. Like, he was mad. This was a mad baby. He was
not having it.
He was not having a good time. Like, he was half naked on the stage. He was not having a good time. The lead pastor, Paul, comes out again. He does an altar call, and then, like, the cast comes to the front of the stage. And, like, people are going up, and, like, the cast is, like, laying hands on them, and, like, it's just this whole thing.
Wow.
So after the prayer, the show just ends. So I did a count of the songs that were remixed. I'm just going to say them real quick. So songs that were remixed in the show, we have Seven Rings by Ariana Grande, Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi, Dancing Queen by ABBA, and Can't Help Falling in Love with You by Elvis Presley, and my personal favorite, Press by Cardi B. That is all I have on Victory.
Yeah. And then not to mention later, because I showed Ashtyn this one later, I sent it to her about some guys at a church during a Christmas performance who were dancing topless.
Yeah, I saw that. My gosh.
Yeah, it was just getting out of hand.
It was sexual.
Yeah.
Like, it was really bad.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about how do we think rightly about these things. And like I said earlier, these were extra performances at these churches. As far as we know, they were not their Sunday morning worship gathering. I don't know exactly what they do. I'm sure if they're doing a production this big and costing this much money, I'm sure their Sunday mornings have some sort of entertainment value as well. But also maybe you're thinking, I don't see anything wrong with any of that. It's fun and it's entertaining. I mean, it's Christmas time, and so that's kind of things that we expect to see. Like we see movies on Netflix that are Christmas and fun and things like that, or the music that's played, throughout the Christmas season. And maybe you're thinking as well, like people who wouldn't normally go to a traditional church service may go to and benefit from something like this. And I would respond to those objections with maybe, and you could be right about that. But I would also follow that up with a question. And the question would be, are you sure you're showing them or giving to them the correct message and perception of what the church actually is and is to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
So if you just go back into the scriptures, because that's what we want to do. So if we're going to think rightly about something, we want to look at what the Bible says about these particular things. So we'll look at what the Bible says in a few different places, and then we'll look at something more historical that has been in place to help the church kind of think through these particular issues. But even if you go back to the book of Acts, right when the church is starting, in the book of Acts, chapter 2, you have the Holy Spirit has come, the preaching of the word has begun, and then early on, after Peter's sermon in Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit falls upon the church, you get to verse 41 that says, "So those who received his word were baptized, and there were added that day about 3,000 souls." And so that happened because of the preaching of the Bible. Peter was preaching the word of God. People were convicted by the Holy Spirit of God, and they turned their hearts to God. And so 3,000 souls, that's a lot of people. And then right after that, which is something you might be more familiar with, is Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, that says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers, and all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." So you see the preaching that happens within the church. Then you see the activity that is happening within the church. I don't see anything in there about extravagant Christmas dramas or Christmas plays. Not saying that they're altogether wrong. That's not what I'm saying here. But I'm trying to say what is the right way to kind of think about these particular things. And so I would say, looking at Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, it's a lot more simple than these extravagant productions that these big churches try to put on every single year. And they always hit the news. They always hit now TikTok and Instagram, and they essentially get made fun of and ridiculed, and people can't believe that churches would be putting on something this extravagant and doing these different types of productions, and I'd have to agree with that. I don't think there's anything that's helpful about that. We already have a hard enough time as the church in America, and I think sometimes these productions make it a lot harder for those who are seeking to be faithful and to live like the church did in Acts chapter 2. So then you have Paul in 1 Corinthians. So he's writing to a church, and he deals with lots of different issues and things that are going on within the church that are causing division amongst its members. And one of the topics that Paul addresses later in this letter to the Corinthian church is dealing with orderly worship in chapter 14 of 1 Corinthians. And some of you might be familiar with this because it is talking about spiritual gifts and prophecy and speaking in tongues, and sometimes we get really excited about that. And maybe we can talk about that some other time on the podcast, but not today. But what I want us to see is what Paul is really trying to address here is the worship and the activity that happens within the church is to be orderly, that there is an order to it that God has given to us from His Word, and all of those things should not be pointing to other people, human beings. Shouldn't be pointing to the preacher or to a worship leader, no matter how good they are, how good the music is, or some production that has, really good actors and actresses, or really good music, or really good production value, or anything like that. The worship that is to be happening in the church is always to be pointing to Jesus. And that's where it begins and that's where it ends. And so one of the ways in which you can evaluate these particular productions or church services is Jesus being put on display? Is he the main character throughout the worship service? Is he the main character throughout whatever Christmas production you may have seen this past Christmas season? Is Jesus the one who is being made famous, or is it somebody else? And if it's somebody else, then that's something that we more than likely need to throw out and not participate in. Another passage, or just one verse, and it's one of Paul's epistles in Colossians chapter 2, where he is addressing different ways in which people worshipped in Colossae, and seeking to warn the church members in Colossae at that particular time. And he addresses this idea of worship and how you live your life as the church, as believers. And he talks about these different forms of worship having an appearance of wisdom in promoting self-made religion and asceticism and severity to the body, but they are of no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh. So Paul is saying there are people amongst you who are going to promote themselves and promote their own rules and regulations that have no value in helping you to live the Christian life, and helping you to see your sin and repent of your sin. And so that's another way in which we can evaluate, think rightly about a church. Is the worship service forcing you to look at your sin? Is the preacher preaching a sermon in which you have to look inward, that you really have to wrestle with yourself as a sinner? Is that person doing that? And Paul says if they're not, they have no value in stopping the indulgence of the flesh.
I definitely agree with that, and it especially stood out to me when you said, is the service you're doing or the production that you're doing, is it focused mainly on Jesus? And in both of these productions that we took a look at here earlier, they're clearly focused on, I think, the viewer, mainly. They're focused on entertaining their audience. And the Victory Baptist was definitely, I don't know if it's Baptist, Victory Church, my bad, is definitely focused on, you. Paul's whole sermon was, all about you and making yourself a better person, and they didn't directly bring up Jesus in the first place. They basically said, you can do it on your own. And I definitely don't think that's healthy for anybody to see, especially since I know that they have unbelievers in their audience, and that's not a good introduction to the gospel for those types of people.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I want to continue to talk about not necessarily specifically churches and what the church should look like. We can get into that some other time, but also just talking about what does Jesus call us to as his disciples, as believers, as Christians. And Jesus' call to discipleship is a call to come and die. It's the same call he gives to the rich young ruler, if you remember, who is very religious, who says, I do all the right things, I keep all of the rules, I've done all of these things since I was a child. And when Jesus pushes him even further. He says, sell all that you have and give it to the poor, then you can come and follow me. And the result of that is the rich young ruler goes away depressed. He's downtrodden. He's sad about that because he does not, he doesn't want to give up his wealth, and really he cannot give up his wealth. He is a slave to it. But this sort of message, even today in America, we're in America, so we're speaking specifically about the American church. This is not a message that falls easily on the ears of the American church. We don't like to be told to give up anything, and we've made, because we don't like to give up anything, we've made Christianity so comfortable in the West that to be called to anything outside of this comfort is impossible. But Jesus's command has not changed, or it hasn't adapted to our culture, that we can now say that was then and this is now, and we do things differently now. Christianity has evolved into this. It's stronger, it's more powerful, it's more influential than ever before. And so what we're falling into is the same trap that God's people fell into in 1 Samuel. And if you remember, in 1 Samuel, they wanted a king like the other nations. And I promise I'm going to bring this back around to what we've been talking about. So this wasn't them saying, we want God to be our king. No, they wanted a human king like the other nations so that they could look like the other nations. So today, that is what we are doing as the church. We desperately want to look like the culture. We want to look like the other cultures in the world. If we refer to the church as a separate culture, we want to look like the culture. We want to be accepted. We want to be attractive. We want to be influential. We want to be cool. And so we put on elaborate Broadway-type productions. We become more entertaining on just an ordinary Sunday with the use of videos and set displays that are worthy, smoke shows that are worthy of a TV sitcom. And props. I've seen several pastors use props when they're up on stage, whether it's a boat or a shower letters. Or what was that?
Jesus letters.
It's just anything and everything to make it pop, to make it more attractive. We want a celebrity pastor who is cool and hip and relevant, and not necessarily someone who is biblical and ordinary and faithful. Well, why? Why are we like that? Why do we do these sorts of things? Well, it's because, like Israel, we want to look like everyone else. And I think that's what these Christmas productions that Ashtyn summarized for us. And I'm sure there was plenty more that we could have talked about.
So much more.
But I think that's what it gets around to, is that we want to look like everyone else. We want to be accepted. We want to be brought into the fold of the world. And we don't accept what Jesus says when he says in the Gospels that they hated me and they will also hate you. Because it's the same message that we're preaching. The same message that Jesus preached is the same message that we are preaching as his people now in 2023.
I also, to add to that, I see this, to this happen. A lot of people in my generation fall prey to this. A lot of friends that I know, or just acquaintances in the past, they'll be like, oh, I go to this church because they do this and this kind of youth program, and it's cool and it's fun. And I like it, and it's entertaining. And then, I've even had instances where I bring friends to our church, and they're like, oh, it's different. And I'm like, yeah, because it doesn't have, all of the smoke and lights, and, it's literally just the most basic.
It's very underwhelming.
It's underwhelming, but it's literally, it's the bare minimum, but in the best way possible. And that's how it should be. So, yeah. But it can be especially hard for my generation, Gen Z. Everything's got to be cool, Everything's got to be cool. TikTok worthy.
That's true. Well, that's all we have for this episode of Thinking Rightly. I hope this was helpful for you. I know it's been fun for us to do the research on this over the past couple of weeks. And so we are seeking and trying very hard, because life gets crazy, to do this on a weekly basis and have one podcast a week. But we're new to this podcasting game as well. So we're learning at the same time. So just be patient with us. But we want to do this to try to help build up and strengthen the church. At large, and so that's what we want to do. So Ashtyn, why don't you tell them how they can get in touch with us, how they can keep up with us via social media, things like that.
Yeah, so if you guys want to give us a follow on Instagram, we haven't posted much, but we will be posting more consistently after this episode. But if you guys want to recommend a podcast episode theme or something you want us to address, please feel free to message us on Instagram. You can also use our email, which is thinkingrightlypod@gmail.com. And I actually just started a Facebook page for Thinking Rightly. And I'm going to see how it goes, because Facebook doesn't do as good. But our Facebook is Thinking Rightly Podcast, and you can go on there, check us out, give us some support. And also, you guys, our podcast is on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts.
Oh.
I don't know what you're listening on now, but
fancy.
If you're listening on Spotify, it's also on Apple. So tell your friends. We're on all different platforms. And please recommend episodes. We would love that so much. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening in. And we'll hopefully see you guys, or whatever.
See you in 1 week.
See, not see, but yeah, we'll see you guys in 1 week.